A man in a trench coat in the dark. A woman's lost a kid sleeping in the park. Rag suits, daggers, Park Avenue. Everybody wants to talk to you about just some BS of there. Just some BS. Just some BS of yours. Just some BS. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS of ours.
Welcome back to a very special episode of...
Everyone's so fucking stupid. Why aren't more people intelligent like me? I'm so lonely, so lonely, so lonely and sadly alone. There's no one, just me only, sitting on my rental home. I work really hard and make up great friends, but nobody listens, no one understands. Seems like no one takes me seriously, and so I'm lonely, a little lonely. Poor little me.
So we start off this week's episode with a rendition of I'm So Lonely by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Ill.
What do you mean ill?
Kim Jong-il. That was still...
Oh,
Kim
that was still the
Jong-il.
dad.
Although it's Kim Jong-un now. The funny thing is, that film was made 13 years ago. I watched it last night. No, 2 nights ago. And it could have been made yesterday. It just changed the name. Even the Film Actors Guild, FAG, as it, in the
Yes.
film led by Alec Baldwin and Sean Penn, etc. It's still the same people.
Everything, pretty much, you know, it's
Even the whole America fuck you. If anything, it made me realize that I actually really like Donald Trump now. Because I think he saw that film and saw it as inspiration of, I want to bring, basically, the current world as it is a Team America cosplay.
yeah. Okay. All right.
I'd like to bring a bit of culture into the podcast, so I'm going to, it's a film suggestion for listeners. If you haven't seen, even if you have seen it, because I have seen it before as well, do watch the film. For whatever reason, I actually found it better this time around than when I watched it originally. I found it a bit silly, but now... Because then it just was a little bit sort of, like a goofball comedy. But now it almost seems... And this is the sad thing. I mean, Team America now, 13 years after it was made, is better than it was 13 years ago. Because then it was, exaggerated goofball comedy. Today, it is satire and political commentary. Slight difference, but a key one.
Yeah, America. Fuck yeah.
How are you, Nick? You gave me the silent treatment earlier, but
I'm doing very well. I've been deep in research for this special episode. And just to kind of get back to it, because we never actually did this. Welcome back to an all new episode of the Just Some BS podcast. I'm your host along this wild and crazy journey of the American Neck, joined as always by the man with a plan, the beer doctor himself,
Yeah.
Radovan.
Yes, hi.
Beer doctor, how goes it?
Yeah, all right. I apologize for being a bit late. I was delayed by Hurricane Irma. It's positively windy and rainy outside.
That's not even something to joke about, but
It's
yes.
meant to be a big hurricane, so I assume this is its sort of outwardly things. Because I have to say, it's been raining in London pretty much all weekend.
Yes.
Apart from yesterday.
It rained yesterday.
It did, really. See, there you go. It's been raining in London pretty much all weekend.
But it's London, it rains all the time anyways.
No, we've had a reasonably decent summer.
Yes, but, it was... Let's see, I went to go watch It yesterday, and it was not raining. It was not raining prior to me entering the theater. And it was not raining after I left the theater. But in the amount of time that I was in the theater, it rained.
I don't know where to begin. Whether to begin with your horrible attempt at punning, or the fact that you refer to the cinema as a theatre. I mean, what do you refer to a theatre as? What's a theatre to you people?
Theater. A movie theater.
Oh my god, movie theatre. A, film. A. B. Theatre is for
Movie.
live actors performing a play.
Movie.
Or, I don't know.
Movie.
Maybe you call the live theatre racetrack. And actors
Movie.
are astronauts. I went to the racetrack yesterday.
Movie.
The lead astronaut,
It's called a
Billy
movie.
Baldwin, was phenomenal.
Uh-huh. Movie.
Film.
Movie.
Yeah, it's called the London Movie Festival.
Because you call something doesn't mean it's always correct.
That is true. Language is evolving. And your dog is drinking my water.
Well, she wants some. Get down. Get back. Get down.
Get
Get
down.
down.
Get down. And move it all around. Get down.
Welcome back to an all-new episode.
You're starting all over again.
No, I'm just going to piece together the beginning part and try and somehow make all of this work. Earlier you brought up Irma. That's followed by Jose.
It's Kirby afterwards or something as well.
Yeah, after Jose.
Well,
Is Mother Nature just really, really mad at, like, people who voted for Trump?
what? The people,
Texas and Florida?
people from Barbuda.
Well, Texas and Florida.
We really should stop doing these countries thing, because I mean we did Barbados and Hurricane Harvey battered it, and we did Barbuda, and we were saying what a great country it is to invade.
Yeah.
And you know, take over the independence movement. Well, there's no movement to take over now, because 95% of the buildings on Barbuda have been destroyed.
Yeah.
And now all the people have fled anyway because of Hurricane Jose.
Yeah, so basically, if you want an island, unfortunately, there's no flights that are actually going in there at this time. But if you got a boat or a ship, there's an island. Go and claim it.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, this is the thing. There's a few people, for instance, in Florida, refusing to leave despite the orders to evacuate, for all sorts of reasons that I would classify as not entirely rational. But on the plus side, if they do survive, they'll be in a prime position for, you know, when the looting starts. So silver linings and all.
Yeah, I feel that I spent a little bit of time this morning watching CNN, and they were showing the coverage.
Jesus Christ, I didn't realize you sunk to those depths.
It was CNN, ABC News, or MSNBC in order to get the best actual coverage. I think Fox thinks it's fake. It's fake news. There's no real hurricane. It's all fake news. So, Rush Limbaugh said it was a liberal conspiracy. Until he evacuated his home in Florida. But for the week leading up to it, he said it was a liberal conspiracy and the storm wasn't as big as what it is. Yeah.
Conspiracy to achieve what?
You know what? Yeah, it was. I was reading about Rush talking about on his show that it was a. Who knows why it's a liberal conspiracy? Rush Limbaugh, he's so high on opiates that the fuck, he probably thinks it's little green men that are doing it. But no, I was just watching because CNN hires the idiots that are willing to stand in the worst part of the possible storm to get that story. So it's almost worth it. You have these people that, you know, standing in 3 feet of water talking about how power lines just fell, so this is probably not the best place to be standing.
I don't know. I mean,
Makes for entertaining television.
I disagree, because I've been watching a bit of. I mean, in all honesty, look, hurricane hits hurricane territory during hurricane season to me isn't exactly an idea of thrilling news. I mean, yes, of course, tragedy, costs of mainly property, but some lives have been and will be lost, and that's obviously sad. But then, you know, it's not like you don't have a track record of centuries of hurricanes going through that area to, rely on when choosing where you live. And it's not like, the United States is densely overpopulated. There are large chunks of Utah, for instance, that are, perfectly available and hurricane-free. So to me, it's consequences of decisions. It's like, obviously if I get shot taking a hike through Syria with my American flag backpack, then it is, it's unfortunate, but you can't exactly say not his fault. Same if you build, a house out of matchsticks in a hurricane territory.
Well, what we always used to say is in Tornado Alley, which is basically from northern Texas up through Chicago, which is an area that tornadoes tend to always get because the cold air from the north and the warm air from the Gulf Coast come together, and it just perfectly lines up right in that area. And I always wondered why there were so goddamn many mobile homes in that area. And it didn't make sense to me because every year a category, a 5 on the Fukushima shale or some shit like that would hit, and all you would see is 4 miles caravans thrown fucking like, and I'm like, well, but why put the caravans there then? Why not just go 100 miles left or right? They always hit the same place.
Yeah, see, caravans, homes, as in static homes.
Yes.
I'm being a bit deliberately provocative. I mean, obviously, I can see the appeal, particularly if you're not well-to-do, and I assume in, these places, property isn't exactly super expensive because, well, it's hurricane territory. Anyone who doesn't need to live there won't. So I can see the appeal and, the natural human tendency to just assume luck will be on our side, which it rarely, if ever, is because, statistical probability trumps whatever sense of personal fate you might have.
Yes.
But yeah, mobile homes, parking mobile homes in tornado territory, that's just not very smart.
Yeah.
But anyway, so to me, I can see why it's such a big meal for the multi-course meal for the news cycle. But I'm personally not particularly riveted by the story, even though it's a huge hurricane. But if you live long enough, at some point a big one will come.
Yeah.
But I was watching the footage and all these sort of reports a little bit because, my app girlfriend, her brother is there at the moment in Florida, so she's obviously concerned. So she's been showing me some footage and frankly, just, you watch those reports, it's like, winds 200 miles an hour and destructive forces, and you see a bit of a breeze, I suppose, in the background, and it's just rainy, and they are standing in wellies, and there's a bit of water, but they're talking about this sort of unyielding force of nature. And then in that middle of the shot, there's just a guy who just walks past with sort of shopping bags in the background, just perfectly fine. And you just look at it and go, maybe it is a liberal conspiracy. I still don't know what it achieves. But I don't know. I just think this whole thing has been blown out of proportion. I'll see myself out.
Yeah, I think we can stop the show there. We've hit the all-time low of puns, and we can't go...
Oh, Mr. It. You started it.
I didn't even try to start it. I was just trying to
You started it. It is the mega of this episode.
It's kind of crazy because there's not a lot of... This is one of the first weeks I think we've had in a long time that there's nothing other than natural disasters going on. I mean, the news is pretty mild.
Yeah, it's mostly been ongoing things or things of interest, but there's nothing, I guess... Everything had just got... I guess the kind of... Well, there's the semi-genocide in Burma, I guess.
There's a genocide in Burma?
Wow, you're informed. Yes, the Rohingya people of Burma, or Myanmar, or whatever you want to call it. See, the thing is, if you remember Aung San Suu Kyi, the female almost leader of Burma, who won the election and then was overthrown by a military coup, and the military junta in Burma or Myanmar ruled the country for a number of years until they agreed to a peaceful transition of power. In the meantime, Aung San Suu Kyi was under house arrest. She won the Nobel Peace Prize for her peaceful opposition and continued resistance, blah blah blah. And she now became de facto leader of the country. She's still prohibited from leading the country, but she's the puppet master, so to speak, and therefore happy story. Apart from the fact that a chunk of Burma is populated by over 1 million large minority of Muslims, as opposed to the the Buddhists that occupy most of the country. Again, weirdly, Buddhist, not exactly a religion you associate with genocide, but there we go. Their villages are being burnt out. Mm-hmm. The population is escaping, is trying to get into Bangladesh, which has... let me pause. Just want to make sure that it is Bangladesh. Yep, it is Bangladesh. 3, 2, 1. They're trying to get into Bangladesh. And, you know, for the regular listeners of our podcast, we did Bangladesh a few weeks back. And I think we've fairly conclusively established it is a country you're trying to escape from, not
run
to.
Yeah.
So if you're running to it as your point of refuge, whatever it is you're running from...
must be really, really
I'm
bad.
going to stay the fuck far away from that. To the point where there's so many of them fleeing that the government of Bangladesh has ordered its border guards to close the borders and not to let them through, right?
Yeah.
But in an extraordinary display of humanity and people power, the border guards just refused to follow these orders. And they said, you know, on the ground, the suffering is so big that they just can't, as people with consciousness, or conscience, can't prevent these people from coming in. So they've said they've opened the borders and they've let them through.
Okay.
But again, that only showcases the suffering these people must be going through. And leaders worldwide have been appealing through some, I would say, almost strong language for the Nobel Peace Prize winning hero Aung San Suu Kyi to kind of, you know, perhaps notice that this is happening, but there's been deafening silence from Burma or Myanmar. So, yeah, that's been happening. Also...
Wait, just chipping up a little thing about Peace Prize. You realize Barack Obama was given the... Nobel Peace Prize in the middle of his constant drone attacks that killed thousands upon thousands of innocent civilians.
Yeah.
I know I tend to lean a little left, but it doesn't really make sense how somebody who's murdering...
How do you define peace?
Well, not killing people?
Yeah, exactly. And when there's nobody left to kill, there's peace. That makes perfect sense.
Wasn't that a Stalin quote, maybe?
I don't know, but I mean...
It sounds very Stalinish.
But both Stalin and Hitler were nominated for the Peace Prize.
Yeah.
So, you know, there you go. There's multiple ways of achieving peace. You're just so narrow-minded in your social justice warriorness. But anyway, speaking of Burma and Myanmar... I would like to use this opportunity to do a shout out to the Catholic teacher at my primary school, who I don't have many traumatic memories.
Okay.
From my childhood, but the highest ranking, and this is a complete digression, but it's there are a few moments in life that have angered me to the point of me losing control and wanting to physically seize somebody's existence.
Okay.
Now, I grew up in the beautiful world of the post-prosperous Eastern Bloc.
Oh, this is fantastic.
Once the evil capitalists demolished the communist paradise that was built there of equality and respect, and we've turned into wild capitalist animals, there still remained this great after effect of the communist regime called education. Now, I used to go to school. And in primary school, as a kid, when you reached 3rd grade, so this would have been about when you were 9 years old.
Okay.
You were given, or rather your parents were given a choice on which sort of classes to enroll you in.
Mm-hmm.
One of the choices was which language you would study,
Okay.
which would have been either English or German, or back then an experiment French,
Mm-hmm.
which was eventually cancelled because they had no one French speaking in the whole town.
Couldn't find a French teacher, huh?
Perhaps they should have thought that through before they offered French. Anyway, so there was that one choice, English and German, and there was another choice, whether you wanted to enroll your child in an ethics class or in religious studies.
Ooh.
Now, religious studies meant Catholicism because that's was and still pretty much is the only religion. I mean, there's a few minority Protestants, and they had a bit of a
Kerfuffle.
dilemma to make. I mean, because religious studies really wasn't, it was hardcore Catholicism.
Okay.
But anyway, I always love, I mean, in retrospect, I loved that, you go to a parent, so would you like your child to be ethical or Catholic? Which I always found hilarious. Anyway, I took the ethics side of things and ended up being taught by the substitute religious studies teacher who used to take us to church every other week, but that's besides the point. One day the teacher was ill, so they had to combine the class of ethics and Catholicism, so we had a joint ethical Catholic class. And since the Catholic teacher, the lady, kind of couldn't quite reconcile of how to make Catholicism ethical, she decided, let's just have a play lesson.
Okay.
You kids do whatever the fuck you want. Oh no, and then the suggestion came, let's play this game called, it's basically called Name, Place, Animal, and Thing.
Okay.
Right? And the whole point of this game is there's a letter chosen at random
Yes.
of the alphabet, so A, B, C, D,
You did learn the alphabet. Well done.
Quark,
Oh.
Wuzza,
Never mind.
crossed arms and a skull, that sort of thing. And based on that letter, you pick a name, you pick a place, this could be a town or a country, etc., animal and a thing.
Okay.
And you score more points based on...
Originality? Or?
Oh, exactly.
Okay.
If you score less points, if say you get the letter D, everyone is going to say dog as the animal. You don't score points for that. If you say dolphin, you might score more.
Oh, okay. You really
Or-
you were trying to think of a D. You were really struggling.
Or, Diplodocus for, a 9-year-old would have been quite a, I guess... Then again, 9-year-olds like dinosaurs. But anyway, you get the point.
Yes.
So we got the letter M.
Okay.
So I did, my name, Marx, I guess, would have been my choice. And then for place, I thought, I know one, no one will choose.
Milan.
No, I did Myanmar. Because I know most people consider it Burma, but at the time, the official name of the country was Myanmar.
Okay.
So I put that in, and in all fairness, perhaps irrationally so, and it wasn't a nice trait, but I felt incredibly smug. Because I knew no one was going to get... I was going to boss that round, because I knew the 2-3 countries everyone else was going to... I had Myanmar.
Yeah.
No one probably even knew that was a thing.
Okay.
What I didn't quite necessarily factor in is that no one included the teacher. Who, when we read our answers and I said Myanmar, obviously all the other students said, bullshit, he made it up. Because, I mean, it sounds like he made up Myanmar. It does not sound like a serious country. So everyone like, boo, made up, deduct points, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nah, Miss Teacher. Like, Radovan, why do you feel the urge to make up these things? That's really not nice straight, and, well, frankly, you gave me no other choice but to disqualify you. And I just lost it. I started screaming at her. Well, what the fuck do you mean? I probably didn't use that.
You're in third grade, you're 9 years old, and you're saying, what the fuck did you mean? Okay.
Yo, bitch.
That explains a lot.
No, I mean, I said, yeah, this is Myanmar is a country, but, no internet, so there's you can't Google it up and prove them. I was, asking to be allowed to go to the geography department so I can bring an atlas and show.
Yes.
But then I realized our atlases were still from the Soviet era, so it would have been Burma on the map.
Yeah.
So I couldn't really help. And there was nothing I could do. And she was just so adamant that it's really whether I know you take ethics, but it's neither ethical nor Catholic to lie, and it's not a nice trait. I'm not lying, you fucking bitch. And that was it. I was disqualified. And then I had to sit and I remember for days anyone who would listen, I was like, that fucking bitch. And next day I came to school with an atlas. When specifically asked my mother to go buy me an atlas that was made after the 1950s, just so it would have Myanmar on it. And I came to her and said, look, Myanmar, country. And you know what she said? I don't care, and shut the door.
I'm surprised she wasn't your first victim.
Well, I can't comment on that.
Okay. Wow, that was a rabbit hole down the.
But yeah, it took me a long time to be nice to Catholics after that. I've gotten over it, and I've learned that one person isn't representative. But for my personal view, that little episode did more damage than all the Crusades put together in terms of the reputation of the Catholic Church. Because as far as in my childish brain, it's like, well, and I flirted because my grandmother was devout Catholic, and I flirted with it, at that age, and this, cured me completely because I thought, well, so she's an ordained, she's part of the religion. And I don't know what her function was, but she was she was part of the church. She wasn't just someone who taught; she was part of the church. So I thought, surely she's in some sort of communion with God. So unless God has a political slant and doesn't agree with the junta dictatorship in Burma, or Myanmar, in which case perhaps you should have said something about, say, the Crusades or the Inquisition, then either God doesn't know her geography, in which case she doesn't know everything as she's supposed to.
So therefore she can't exist.
So either it's a hoax, an imposter, or she doesn't exist. And I was just so disappointed. Anyway, so that episode was in lieu of any real news happening this week. Moving on, Nick, do you have something for us?
The crazy thing is how deep we just delved into Radovan's psyche when it came to I just, that's your childhood. I don't recall having anything
to do with my childhood. No, of course.
No, I don't have those stories. I guess it was because I just wouldn't pay attention that much to. Yeah, I don't think I would be that. You are a stubborn person, so I kind of understand that. That makes sense.
No, I don't. I don't mind being wrong. I rarely am, but I don't mind being wrong when I am, because it's an opportunity to learn something. But it's just this searing injustice I perceived, and that just really. I was mad.
I bet you were.
I was mad.
Now, we've been kind of chugging along, and we have a set of... it's almost a weekly segment now where we talk about beer news, as we used to back in the days of Perfect Pint. And this one tickled my fancy a bit that I've seen, and I'm just wondering, is there anybody on your Christmas list that you think you might be getting these for? Our friend Edwin, I think, would be someone who would be all about this. Shopping for beer lovers is difficult, or so I've been told. I feel a beer lover will always love the gift of craft beer, but I guess anyone can be persnickety. Plus, I see that it might be intimidating selecting a bottle for some of the more zealous beer collectors. But these new Adidas beer shoes are here to solve your problem.
What?
I knew you'd love this. Adidas is launching Munchin Oktoberfest shoes. They strike us as the perfect way to show the hophead in your life that you care. Whether you're shopping for a birthday, anniversary, or the Great American Beer Festival, nothing says I love you like sick kicks. Munchin is a classic Adidas style, originally released in the 70s. Now they're back with some beer-savvy upgrades. The shoe is named after the beer-famous city of Munich, which is the host of the renowned Oktoberfest held every year in September. The limited edition Adidas beer shoes are said to be a nod to the true spirit of Oktoberfest, complete with embroidered leather inspired by the lederhosen. The shoes replace the stitches Munchin with the customary toast of Prost along the side. The limited edition, The true value of the gift is that it keeps giving, and the durable DPBR coating choose beer and water resistance material, making it an essential part of any beer festival aficionado's wardrobe. The shoes are available starting September 2nd. Whether you plan to attend Oktoberfest in Munich, a celebration in the States, or joining us in Denver for the Great American Beer Festival in October, they're obviously an upgrade from your normal festival flip-flops. Plus, they'll match any pretzel necklace perfectly.
How much are these shoes?
$159 to $95.
159. I take it Adidas are one of the sponsors of the Great American Beer Festival. Judging by that lovely advertorial, can I see these shoes? Are you shitting me?
They're currently sold out, though, so...
I mean, this broke me, Nick. I don't quite... I'm going to say some thoughts. That's a ridiculous amount of money for an Adidas trainer.
Okay.
B, horrible Adidas branding aside.
Yes.
They're not actually bad-looking shoes. If you could only carve out all the Adidas shit from it. But I mean, the whole... I mean, there's nothing beery about the shoe. I thought at least, you know...
They'd be made out of hops?
I don't know, it would they'd have really high soles, and it would have like a mini bright cask inside the sole, so as you take steps there'd be sort of like lines going to your mouth, and you could drink as you walk, or something practical like that. But there's absolutely, they're not even colour of beer, it's a blue, white, gold shoe.
I didn't think it would... I assumed you'd have some sort of opinion, but I didn't think it'd break you. I didn't think it would.
I honestly can't form an opinion. It's. I mean, this is just cynical marketing to the point where you just. I mean, this is. I mean, it's like me putting out a shoe called the Harry Potter shoe, and it's just a shoe or a croc, and call it the Harry Potter croc. In fact, that's what we should have on our podcast store. We'll have the Harry Potter croc. I mean, frankly, if all those people we've played the music of over the past few episodes hadn't sued us, then I think J.K. Rowling is a pretty sure bet. So, yeah, you can buy a Harry Potter croc. How much is a croc?
I don't know. I've never owned a pair of Crocs.
Well, they're cheap, right?
I assume so. Let's just do a Google search. You're looking at about £20.
£20, excellent. So, a special edition, Just Some BS podcast, Harry Potter Crocs, on sale right now for a limited edition of however many we can sell, on sale for just £179. It's because it's extra stupid child naggy premium, so you can, to make the nagging quiet, you can hike the price at an unbelievable bargain, down from its original retail price because of they're handcrafted, made using bits of Daniel Radcliffe. So they originally retail at £350. Now on special Christmas sale, £179. Shipping 2 to 4 years. They're yours. Just log on to just some BS whatever our website is, and
JSBSpod.com.
go to the store section and click buy Harry Potter Special Edition JSBS Crocs, or if that's not there, which I guess it isn't, send us an email at justsomebs@email.
JSBSpod@gmail.com.
That's the one. Yeah. So and say I want a pair of no, we don't sell them in pairs. This is how rare they are. We only sell them individually, and you don't know which side you're getting. So it's all about buy multiples, just so there's a left and right in there somewhere. If you buy 10, you'll get a free JSBS Harry Potter Durex condom, signed by either Daniel Radcliffe or Emma Watson, depending on
who we can get to autograph it.
Which one? I'm going to get them. I'm just going to write Emma Watson on it. I mean, it'll sort of
Use the hashtag PotterCrocs when talking about this with your friends on social media. And be sure to look at our Instagram page for upcoming pictures of the Beer Doctor himself rocking the new Potter Crocs
around London. That's a step too far, but our Instagram will have a picture of the special edition Harry Potter Crocs, just so they don't hear. Just put some any random shit Crocs you find on Google Images and put that, and maybe draw glass, put a Photoshop a pair of glasses next to them,
or maybe like a lightning bolt on it or something.
Look at you, Mr. Designer.
I was just thinking.
Yeah, but then we'll have to draw a fucking lightning bolt on them when we do send them.
Yeah, but it'd be easy. Just draw it on there with like a crayon.
Oh, you're a marketing genius.
Yeah, come on now. It's all about the marketing.
Yeah. With the special lightning edition at just £219.
There you go. So feel free to send those emails to jsbspod@gmail.com to get your order in. And if you get on the highest tier of our Patreon, by going to patreon.com/JSBSpod, you can be entered into a drawing for a free single Croc. The drawing will take place on October 30th in 2018, and those who contribute the most to Patreon over the entire year.
Muslim calendar.
Yeah, well, we always use a Muslim calendar. No, come on. And those that contribute the most to the Patreon will have the best opportunity to actually win. Your name's entered every time you pledge via Patreon.
It's good that you called it a drawing rather than a draw as well, because contractually it allows us to just draw a sketch.
Oh, I know. Exactly. With Monday being 9/11, some of the kids in the office were asking me about my thoughts on some of the conspiracies that were out there. So I sent a message to Radovan just to kind of poke the bear a bit. What you people don't understand is it gives me more joy than you could ever understand to insinuate certain things to Radovan and then watch him explode on everything that could possibly be wrong with the statement that I made. And it's so entertaining for me that I do it so sparingly, because if I don't, it loses its it loses a bit of its joy. So why don't we just go through some of the theories, and let's hear your opinion on the theories as a whole.
Seriously?
Yeah.
We're going to do 9/11 conspiracy theories. I understand it's the... okay.
Well, let's just think about it.
Listeners, you go for a walk.
Okay, so the most common conspiracy theory out there is foreknowledge. Conspiracy theorists claim that the action and inaction by the U.S. officials was because they had foreknowledge of the attacks themselves, and that an extraordinarily amount of put options were placed on both United and American Airlines stocks, and speculated that insiders may have known in advance of the coming events of 9/11 and placed their bets accordingly.
May I?
Oh, please.
Stocks are being speculated with on a daily basis.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I'm sure you will find people making stock purchases or sales on properties in Florida months ago. That doesn't mean that they have built some sort of massive island in the Atlantic with the world's biggest fan collection just to create a whirlwind, so that months later Hurricane Irma destroys and you know they get to rake in on insurance or whatever. Secondly, in terms of the American government's inaction, a lot of the things we take for granted now, in terms of the amount of surveillance of not just terrorist activities, but also of flight patterns, etc., have been implemented as a result of 9/11. Now, if you're not one of the 9/11 conspiracy theorists, and you have the luxury of that extra neuron, use the one you're listening with. Use one for listening, and the other one perhaps for thinking. If these measures were implemented after 9/11, they probably couldn't have been used during 9/11, which it's basically Hanlon's razor, which is one of my favorite razors. I wish they made a 3-blade Hanlon razor for that extra close shave. Hanlon's razor states, don't attribute to malice something that can be explained by stupidity. And I think this is very much the case here. Some people have this idea of the US government as this all-knowing, all-seeing super brain Krang from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or House of Cards, Kevin Spacey, that, you know, thinking million steps ahead. No, people. Donald Trump is the president of America. George W. Bush was the president of America.
Dick Cheney.
These are not scheming masterminds. And this is reflected across, you know, Donald Trump, people of the United States. Donald Trump, by his very nature of being the president of the United States of America, is the finest from amongst you. He is the finest of your generation. That's why you have elected him to be your leader. And if that is your finest, just imagine the level of competence that spreads across the other sort of the little branches of the US government. Do you really think that these branches, of which Donald Trump is the finest, have it in them to orchestrate 9/11? First, that was the second point, and finally, third point, foreknowledge, and that this was somehow planned. Yes. I'll offer you another razor. This is my third favourite razor. Hanlon's is first. Gillette Mach 3 is second. and Occam's razor
Well, I figured Occam's going to be in there at least somewhere in the top 5.
is the 2-blade version, limited edition, released in '97. Brilliant blade. Occam's razor, which states that when something has a simple explanation, it's probably explained by the simple explanation rather than the ridiculous layers. And look, why would you let 9/11 happen? Financial gain? You're the US government. You just print more money, or you snuffle, embezzle some from the military budget or whatever. You have ways of getting money that don't involve killing 3,000 people. Okay, fine. Then you go on the whole invasion of Iraq and getting oil, etc. Oh, okay, fine. I commend you for your how much you get out of your neuron. But because you know that Iraq is a place that's, well, I mean, for a neuron that's really good. But again, for those of multi-neuroned amongst you, use the other neurons really here now. There's such a thing as history. And history is essentially a collection of stories of things that have happened, say, unlike, Stephen King novels, or Wallace and Gromit, or...
Wallace and Gromit, huh?
Or,
South Park?
No, South Park is definitely history. And these stories, there are many other stories of the United States government attacking other countries. I believe there's at least 2. You can, for instance, read about it's called The Adventure in Vietnam, I think, is the one. It's a multi-story.
Started in Korea and then went to Vietnam.
Then we have another one called Korea. Then we have perhaps funding the Taliban in Afghanistan. Then we have perhaps funding Iran to install a Shah and protect interests. Then we have perhaps funding Iraq to attack said Iran once they got rid of the Shah. Then we have things like Panama. Then we have things like funding Pinochet in Chile. Then we have the first Gulf War, perhaps, where once we've armed Iraq to attack Iran, then Iraq kind of went, woo, we have all these weapons and America loves us, so we can do whatever. So they attacked Kuwait, and so then the US had to go to Kuwait and defeat Iraq, fighting the very weapons that they gave them. I'm saying 2 things here. A, American government isn't very smart. And B, it doesn't need to cripple its financial center and kill 3,000 of some of its smartest people to have an excuse to go and fucking invade another country. They've used pretty tenuous. I don't even fucking know why the Vietnam War started, for instance.
North Vietnamese was communist. And
Yeah,
was
exactly. It was a household. It was a household fight. I mean, if I invented the U.S. government for Christmas dinner at my family's house, that would probably escalate into a multi-year conflict. There was basically a Vietnamese local squabble, but because of the whole domino communist effect, turns out politics doesn't work like a fucking board game, unless it's Risk. They're just random men drop from the sky, and you get to place them on various bits of the... That Risk briefly worked as a political model for what was then the colonization of Africa. That's the only exception.
Okay.
So my rebuttal to this is, if the US government wanted to invade Iraq, it could have easily done with, I don't know, let's just go for a crazy strategy such as invent that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. And that would have been a good enough reason.
Well,
which
they invented it.
Oh no, oh my god, what is this? That was the fucking reason, so it wasn't even 9/11.
No, because the terrorists were said to have come from Afghanistan, which they actually hadn't. They actually were Saudi. But that's neither here nor... Yeah, you don't ever say anything bad about the Saudis.
Surely not the Free People's Democratic Republic of Saudi Arabia.
Exactly, because you don't, everybody's in bed with the Saudis, even current President Trump. All right, so moving on to the next.
I think there's more. Okay.
Yeah, well, there's multiple that I need you to. Never in the history of the world has a steel building.
Sorry, no. For those listeners who can't see us, I'm slightly tilting my head and holding my hands in a cup-like manner underneath my left ear, because there's a lot of my brain cells are jumping out, committing suicide at the moment as Nick reads this. So I'm trying to collect them, and then I'm going to give them CPR and try to eat them so that they can go snort them, in fact, because that's the quickest way to your brain. If you ever want something to get quickly to your brain, snort it. That's how they did lobotomies as well. Ice pick through the nose, boom, crack, there's only a little bit of thin shell of skull, and boom, you're in the brain. Anyway, carry on.
Never in the history of the world has a steel building burned and collapsed upon itself.
No.
Other
Apart from the 2 cases where it happened.
Actually, 3 cases. The Twin Towers in Tower 7.
Oh yes, Tower 7.
In Tower 7 collapsed without even being hit by an airplane, and for only burning a matter of somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 hours. And it collapsed upon itself in what could only be described as the closest thing to a planned implosion, and the fact that it was brought down on its own footprint. So, planes hit buildings. Buildings burn for a couple hours and then fall down. Pancake effect? Is that the theory you're going with on why it looked like explosions were taking place on the lower floors?
Nick, again, Occam's razor, but Occam's razor really slices through this whole fucking conversation. Controlled demolition.
Yes.
How many have you seen that start from the top?
Well, the problem you got to understand is stop, because I have watched thousands upon thousands over the last course of 15 years. I've seen the towers come down hundreds of times.
You need to get out more.
Well, but what I will say is, if you really look at it, there was activity on the lower section of the building prior to it, and if you watch a controlled demolition, it does drop down, usually from about the center, and then goes down to the complete bottom.
There have been numerous construction reports that have conclusively shown that building behaved as any building in that situation with that construction would have behaved. Myth number 1: the steel burned. It didn't burn. Steel doesn't burn.
Of course.
No burnt steel was found.
Well, molten steel was found.
No, slag was found. That's a waste byproduct, not actual steel.
Oh, okay. So slag was found. Melted slag was found.
Yes, steel does not burn. Now, if you look at the way, and this is very difficult to explain without drawing it, but I'll do my best. If you recall the World Trade Center, that means you're 25 and above, I guess. It was basically 2 big rectangles, right?
Yes.
The thing about the World Trade Center, as opposed to something like an Empire State Building, which was actually hit by a plane and survived, although it was a much less forceful collision, is that the World Trade Center was very innovative. It was the tallest building in the world, and they wanted to build it with fewer materials, on the cheap, if you will, while still retaining structural integrity. So, and they wanted, Empire State Building is a big sort of had a very robust support structure. The whole thing about the World Trade Center was meant to be an open, airy building, maximizing rental space, having big windows, etc. So you couldn't do what you did with Empire State Building. So the way they decide to build it is a central core of steel that would have been the primary support mechanism. And then every floor you would and then was an outer support structure. So you had the central core of steel, where you had the lifts, or elevators as you people call them, staircases, blah blah blah, services, and then the outer support layer, which was the outer shell, so to speak, what you saw on the outside of the building. In between those two sections, you essentially had air and offices, maximizing, as I said, rental capacity. However, this alone does not support a building. So you have to actually support the floors themselves. So there was basically a lattice network connecting the outer support system
To the inner.
to the inner support system. The inner support system on its own couldn't bear the weight of the building. The outer system on its own couldn't bear the weight of the building. This lattice was necessary to give them a sort of a joint support framework, with each floor being able to hold 1,300 tons of weight, which was spectacular. The problem that happened with the Twin Towers is that you need all of these elements to work in order to support the building.
Okay.
So you crash a plane through the outer support network. You compromise this.
Okay.
That's fine on its own because it was built to withstand not a jet of this size and at this speed. It was meant to sustain a passenger flight of that era being lost. Accidentally bumping it, not deliberately full speed with fuel. So you have the compromised outer structural area, but it still survives because you have the weight loading. What happens then is the temperatures within weaken the thinner lattice layer connecting the outer support structure and the inner core structure.
Okay.
This is you needed that. This is why it was several hours after the plane hitting, because if you compromise the outer structure, the building still stands. If that lattice fails, what happens is that lattice loses that 1,300 tons of weight-bearing capacity. When it loses that, the floor collapses. When the floor collapses, the building comes down. Now, the building hits the floor below, but that floor now no longer is holding 1,300 tons of weight of one floor. Now it is holding the top 10 floors of the building, way above what it's meant to hold. And so the thing starts going plop, 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 which is exactly how you'd expect that building to behave. If you expect it to fall like a tree, then that would have been horrible design. It was designed so that it would fall like that, rather than spread chaos across. And it looked like a controlled demolition.
Yes.
Because that's what it behaves like. And what you would see as people saying, oh, there were detonators on each floor that went down sequentially. No, what you saw, you have air trapped inside the building. So as the building comes down, there's pressure blasts out windows, and that appears like an explosion, and the building comes down.
All right. Moving on to Flight 93.
Just one, in terms of the third building, World Trade Center 7, this is another supporting case for uncontrolled demolition. With the controlled demolition, because this is the slight difference. Controlled demolition kind of implodes, if you will.
Yes.
It doesn't cause mess. An uncontrolled demolition, this building falling down, causes the mess, because you see that inwards pressure blasting everything out. Debris, windows, furniture, blah blah blah. There was so much shit around that building as it was collapsing, to the point where the same thing that happened with the first two buildings happened to World Trade Center 7, where that outer structural layer gets compromised. Same process happened. It fell down in precisely the same manner. It wasn't just, because people might say, oh, well, okay, fine, the first two were hit by planes, but the other one hasn't. The other one has been significantly damaged to basically the same extent as the first two.
Okay. That takes care of the Twin Towers. What about Flight 93?
Which one was that?
Flight 93 was the plane that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, with the famous cockpit recording. You could hear the individuals say, "Let's go," and they went after the hijackers to take over the plane so that it didn't come back. And according to the report done by the U.S. government, that plane was most likely headed towards the White House.
Yes.
All right. So it crashed in Shanksville in a field.
Yes.
And there was no real debris from a plane.
Well, I thought the conspiracy theory was that there was too much debris.
No, because there was no debris. I mean, they would say that
there was debris.
Not the kind of debris you see when a plane crash. There was a plane crash. Was it over Russia? Within the last year or so, was it Russia, Chechnya? Where was it?
There's a plane crash every year.
No, but where's the passenger plane crash? It was over Russia. Exploded.
Oh, the one that was shot down by a missile.
Possibly, but that's a conspiracy.
That was over Ukraine. No, it was shot down. It was. I mean, that's not a conspiracy. That's the working theory. That was shot down by a straight. No, I think it's not even a theory. I think everyone accepts that it's been shot down by a missile.
Well, other than those people that shot it down with the missile, they say they didn't do it.
Of course, yeah. It's like if you actually fart in class. Everyone around you concludes that a fart has been made, whilst you vehemently deny that there ever was such a thing as fart.
Okay. Now, if you looked at the wreckage from that flight, this is one that was shot with a missile. So there was an explosion. There was fuel on, so you could imagine that it exploded. But there was miles upon miles of pieces of plane, individuals, human beings, suitcases. In Shanksville, there was a hole in the ground with a bit of burnt ground, and there wasn't enough to say, "Oh, this is where the plane went." There was just a fire. How do you explain that one?
Well, as far as I understand, a lot of this sort of mythology of the widespread of the debris comes from a clerical error.
A clerical error?
Where the original reports of how widespread the debris was were based on the length of road linking those, rather than as the crow flies. If you know what I mean.
I understand what you're saying.
So, that estimate was way beyond what would be expected. If you take it as the crow flies, it's perfectly natural for the debris. The other thing is, once again, using our dear friend Occam. What's that?
That's supposedly where the plane hit. I told you, that one still to this day. It's the only one where I go, Because there's no real, you just, even the television news that was out there, you don't see the shit you should see. That's just it. That's the only, I guess, real issue I have, is because even if it flew directly into the ground, nose first, and dug it into the ground, there would have still been this is the going theory, is that's how it crashed, straight down, which
I guess would be,
but the probability of that actually taking place, to be able to actually go straight nose down, because of the way that a plane is designed, just because of the wings, planes can't fly directly down, because as they come down towards the surface, what ends up happening is the wind will press the nose up because of the design of a building, or because of the design of a plane, and so it will actually it might hit nose this way down, but the probability of it going straight down, hitting nose straight down, is the odds you have a better chance of winning the lottery 9 times straight.
Right. I mean, look. This is one, if there is a conspiracy theory around this, that perhaps is the most likely to be perhaps believable, it's this one. However, I would still like to bring our friend Ockham, leading razor manufacturer.
So what's the easiest, then, explanation for this?
Let's look at the circumstances. You have the recordings of the people making the phone calls. You have the reports of them overpowering, and recordings of them overpowering the
Attempting to overpower.
the hijackers to seize
Yes.
control of the plane.
Yes.
The heroic tale if true, and if you know, they knew they were being hijacked and they had reports of what happened elsewhere.
Yes.
Not an inconceivable reaction. I'd probably do a last minute conversion to Islam and try to talk them out of this.
You'd start quoting the Quran?
But I reckon I could learn it in 10 minutes or so to be able to out talk the terrorists. But a brasher sort of American person, looking at no one in particular, probably would have stood up and "Rawr, America, fuck yeah," the shit out of them, which is by all accounts what had happened. If you are the United States government,
Yes.
and you know what has happened, and you know that there's a plane still in the air that's doing the same thing, it is not inconceivable that you would
Shoot it down.
shoot it down.
Yes.
It is not an unfortunate, and I can see why you wouldn't want people to know that you shot a plane full of civilians, even though I think most people would understand this. Yet, the photograph you showed me is not what one would expect in a normal plane crash.
Yes.
However, what was found also is not representative of what you would expect from a plane shot down by a missile.
Yes.
And on the balance of probability, what you do see, it's more likely that this was an unorthodox crash rather than a plane. If you have a plane being shot down by a missile, you'd expect debris all over the place.
Yep.
The radius was much smaller than the initial misrepresentation,
Yeah.
and the bulk of the plane was in the area.
Yes.
So perhaps more in line with the plane bouncing off or exploding upon impact, or that. When you look at something, and this is a good philosophical, and this is often used in debates. Your point of view isn't likely. Therefore, my point of view is correct. Without taking that extra step further to investigate the other point of view and discovering that it is more unlikely than the first point of view, however unlikely that may be. Which is where a slightly, a more fashionable Mr. Ockham shows up, sporting his fedora hat, etc.
The hipster Aqua.
The hipster Ockham, because, both cases are unlikely, but even then, the less unlikely one is still more likely than the more unlikely one, if you know what I mean. So, the fact that it doesn't seem like a normal plane crash does not mean that it was shot down, because if you reverse it the other way around and operate on the fact that the aircraft was shot down, it's an even more unlikely pattern that you see from the plane than if you're working from the theory that it crash landed. However, I'm not going to be as confident about this one as perhaps the other ones.
All right. And the Pentagon one just has all kinds of people say it looks like a missile from the footage, and there's all this CCTV out there, but it's not being released to the public.
There was a Freedom of Information request. So
Multiple.
But they have released stills.
Yeah, but they haven't released the actual entire thing. They released 7 stills.
Do they have the entire thing?
Yes, the FBI went that day and took it from the petrol station that's right there by the Pentagon.
All right. What's the conspiracy theory?
No, the conspiracy theory is it was a missile. And it hit directly in the only part of the Pentagon that hadn't been retrofitted or that had been retrofitted and reinforced to take such a blast to where it wouldn't destroy the entire thing. And it was also the place where the financials for the announcement that was made 2 days prior by Rumsfeld that $3 trillion had went missing. And all of the information about that $3 trillion that went missing was in that area of the building that was then shot, and the $3 trillion was never talked about again.
Okay, let's work on this backwards. Start with the thought process and finish with the actual impact.
Okay.
Starting with the thought process. The very last point you made, that it was missing $1 trillion, and from what you've said, I infer the conspiracy is that this was destroyed to destroy the documentation.
Yes.
I am not an arms dealer. It's one of the things I would like to be one day. I mean, one of the 2 things on my bucket list. I'd like to be a funeral director one day, and I'd like to be an arms dealer. It sounds like a really cool job, fun job, dangerous job, but you meet a lot of people, travel anyway. But I'm not an arms dealer yet. I know I don't even not a bachelor in arms dealing. I don't even have an introductory course. I know nothing about arms dealing. But
I'm sure you can Google it.
But I dare say, having looked at Amazon.co.uk, I would say that the price of a missile is greater than the price of a shredder. So, if, say, I was not 5 years old and wanted to destroy evidence and was given the choice, destroy building or use shredder, however unexciting the latter option is, I would probably go for the shredder. Then again, you might object and say, well, yeah, shredder is the more cost efficient, but you have $3 trillion. I mean, you might as well.
Well, that's a paper trail, but also you got to think about the computers themselves. So, you're just gonna light all the hard drives on fire? Okay.
Have you ever heard of viruses?
When you need to get rid of your hard drives because, well, you were Google searching a bunch of shit you shouldn't, how do you get rid of it?
You wipe it.
You can completely wipe it. I mean, forensic can still get in there and...
No.
Yes.
No. It's been concluded this is another urban myth. Unless you have a fucking electron microscope.
Okay.
Which would cost about, to recover one hard drive, a few £1 million.
Okay.
But even then, you're only going to get fragments.
Okay, so you just wipe all the computers.
You do a virus. You don't destroy. I mean, there has been again, Occam people.
And I'm looking for this easy route. You just need to tell me.
Occam people. There have been bigger frauds than money. There have been CIA experiments that have been shredded successfully, because there are 2 layers. You talk about the crazy ones where they infected people with syphilis, etc. That was the less secret one. The more secret one, once the secret one was uncovered, the documentation of the less secret one, apart from the fact that it existed, has been completely destroyed. Everything, no one knows.
What, HK Ultra?
No, MK Ultra was
proven.
Top. That was the sort of superficial layer, so to speak. The actual shit, what happened, the actual really dodgy stuff, was never found and never will be found because all that stuff is destroyed. So the American government is pretty good at destroying things without,
but
exploding
hold
things.
On. Let's take this all the way back. Because that was a good point. America is good at covering things up and doing anything else. But you said, when this entire segment started, you said, and I quote, the greatest person, the greatest mind, the most intelligent, the best of everyone is the person that was elected as leader is Donald Trump. Donald Trump couldn't find his way out of a fucking wet paper bag. He's got so many ties to fucking Russia that, Jesus fucking Christ, you might as well call him Putin Jr. So, how is it that now you can say that the government's really good at covering shit up and getting rid of shit, when at the beginning you said the government's fucking stupid?
Because the first one was a joke. I was using humour, which we occasionally try to do on this podcast.
See what I did there, right? And I knew it was going to happen. I knew it would come all the way around. When I got to the Pentagon, I knew I'd have you. Because, yes, the government's really good at covering shit up.
Yeah, therefore...
The CIA and the crack epidemic.
Yeah, exploding something is a really shit way to cover something up. Because it can always survive. So, again, if you're trying to destroy a few documents and wipe a few computers, you don't send a missile at them. Because, in fact, that's a really shitty... Because a hard drive can survive that.
Yes.
That's a really shitty way of doing it. That it hit this part... Look, frankly, you hit any part of any building, I'm sure you can build up a conspiracy theory about why that was the particular...
Yes.
You know, it's like the lowered security at World Trade Center on the day of the attack. Sometimes, I know that people would... And this is... We return to Catholicism. People like to have a sense that everything in the world is in order and happens for a reason. And that's a very attractive proposition. But sometimes coincidence is just a coincidence. Moving on from the motivation, let's go to the mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
Missile.
Mm-hmm.
Who launches it from where? Why?
Supposedly a plane. They said there was a plane, a military plane, that had flown over after the... plane, missile, whatever it was, hit.
So, look. This whole Pentagon missile thing only works if you assume that all the other attacks were also equally planned.
Yep.
This means Flight 93 that we've just discussed was a part of the plan.
Yep.
That's a really shitty part of your plan if you just shoot down a plane.
Yep.
That the World Trade Center planes were planned. Okay, we've explained why that's an unlikely theory, or I would say impossible.
Improbable. Nothing's impossible.
No,
You just gotta say nothing's impossible and just throw it out
I
there.
am going to say
improbable.
I'm going to say impossible. We haven't even discussed that the whole thing planned, the amount of cover up, and again the general leakiness of things. Even with MK Ultra, we do know that there was something worse. We just don't have any documentation, so all we can go by is what people say, and we're going to believe blah blah blah. But the American government is good at covering up its relative. It's also leaky as fuck. I mean, I've had civs that were less leaky than the American government. This would have come out. That the level of conspiracy, again, going back to our friend Hanlon, don't attribute to malice what is explained by stupidity. Anyway, and Occam as well. We're using all our razors for the Pentagon. If you already have the two planes hitting the World Trade Center as part of your master plan, a third one to hit the Pentagon so that you don't have all the missile crazy theorists, it's not that big a stretch. You might as well go, it's not like a Hollywood film where, you have a budget. Well, I know we're making a Gulf War thing, but we only really have, we're supposed, the scene is a squadron of 3 planes, but we only have budget for 2, so let's do 2 planes and 1 horse on wings, and we'll just CGI the shit. And you go, okay, the American government isn't Warner Brothers. The American government can afford a 3rd plane, and rather than open itself up to crazy conspiracy theorists saying it was a missile, they could probably just get a 3rd plane to do it. Moving on to the actual impact. There are multiple people who saw planes. More people saw a plane than a missile. Also, it was moving really fast. reliability, still say more people recognize a plane than a missile, and that impact is perfectly in line with a plane rather than a missile crashing.
One thing
into it.
about that is each person who was interviewed that saw the plane did give a different description of the tail, meaning what they saw, whether it was American Airlines, whether it was an actual jumbo jet, or whether it was a private jet.
Nick.
I'm just saying, let's be honest.
We're talking about a plane flying at maximum velocity hitting the ground.
400 miles an hour.
You don't expect to see it. You turn around, you see a massive fucking object crashing into a building. You're not going to remember what the tail looked like, but you know the general shape of a plane versus a missile.
Cool. Now, the last one we'll get into prior to moving on is something that you talked about just momentarily. You said CGI. Nico Haupt, and former chief economist within the Labor Department under the Bush administration, Morgan Reynolds, argued that no planes were used in the attacks. Reynolds claims it's physically impossible that the Boeing planes of Flight 11 and 175 could have penetrated the steel frames of the towers, and that digital compositing was used to depict the plane crashes.
Hold on. A chief economist is commenting on the structural integrity of a building. Interesting. And later, Radovan is going to discuss Marxism or capitalism. Also things that I know fuck all about. Anyway, go on. And you're going to take it as authority.
You're saying you know nothing about Marx?
I'm not an expert on it.
Okay, but I'd say you know more than the average Joe.
Perhaps, but
And
I'm not an expert on
Didn't-
it. I might know.
Did you say an expert?
The chief economist might know a little bit about how that buildings are built, but he's not an expert. I mean, there's no. Anyway, carry on. I mean, this is just.
There were no
Nick,
planes.
You are frustrating.
There were no hijackers.
I have my Occam razor in my hand and razor. Do you want me to cut my wrists
Yes.
with my razors?
Yes, I know. I'm out of the mainstream, but that's the way it is. According to Dave Shaley, the only explanation is that they were missiles surrounded by holograms made to look like planes. He says, which would be well beyond the capabilities of contemporary hologram technology. Watch footage frame by frame and you will see a cigar-shaped missile hitting the World Trade Center. Most non-plane researchers, including Terry Messney and Reynolds, assert that either CGI of a passenger plane was overlaid onto a winged cruise missile or military craft, or that computer-generated images of a passenger plane were inserted into video footage and plane-shaped explosive cutouts were planted in the buildings in order to create the impression of the plane impact. Some truth movement veterans have repeatedly refuted the no-plane claims. In fact, discussion of no-plane theories has been banned from certain conspiracy theory websites, and advocates have sometimes been threatened with violence by posters at other conspiracy theory websites. Yes,
and I would do the same because that's just fucking crazy. Those people don't believe Myanmar exists.
Okay. And last but not least, it was the New World Order. Alex Jones himself and other personalities hold that 9/11 was initiated by a disruptive variety of banking, corporate globalization, and military interests for the purpose of creating a globalist government.
Right, addressing the first one, because I don't like to leave an argument on the note that person is stupid, therefore their argument is not valid. But I hope that in terms of the whole no plane, and we were talking about the probability, the raises.
I don't believe that bullshit.
No, but this is for the benefit of the listener.
Okay.
We're dealing with Cletus here. I hope that all the preceding discussion in terms of the probability, possibility of things, the amount of infrastructure, knowledge, and sophistication that would be required to do this, rather than over a very simple explanation of, on that day, some people whose lives have been shaped by an unfortunate series of events and whose minds have been poisoned by a very appealing and rewarding and, in a way, unquestionable ideology to commit acts of horrible terror that day. As sad as that is, as tragic as that is, as much uncertainty about our own lives as that gives us, to discard that it was all orchestrated, as some form of plan that is greater than even if you do believe in a god or multiple gods. A plan that is more sophisticated than even a god's plan. But that this is more likely than, frankly, a series of human failings on all sides, and well, significant structural failings in some instances. Fine, if you believe that, then there's nothing I can tell you. But isolate that no plane thing. Think about everything else we've said, and then make a judgment. Frankly, removing your desire to see the wickedness, to see some sort of, see a plan, see an order in every act of coincidence, because this is what I find in, you know, a lot of people. I'm not saying there aren't conspiracy theories, and they aren't true. In fact, I think many are true. But I do think that there are certain conspiracy theories, such as this one, or the ones surrounding 9/11, which are, in a way, distractions, and take away a lot of activity, a lot of agenda, a lot of creativity, a lot of drive away from things that really need to be looked into. Corruption in government, in any government, for instance. I think they act as distractions, and remove your own biases, remove your own prejudices, and look at the facts in front of you, and then make a decision or opinion, form an opinion. Is this a conspiracy involving multiple areas of government, involving hundreds of people, probably, involving a cover-up, unprecedented, involving logistics, the amount of luck that this whole operation would have relied on to murder 3,000 people, destroy property, and for no discernible real reason, because any motivation that is given as an explanation, as a motive, as a driving factor for these conspiracy theories, every single one of those goals could and have been achieved in the past and since through other means that did not involve an operation of frankly unprecedented, almost unbelievable scale. See those facts in front of you soberly, and I think the answer to the known plane thing becomes perfectly clear. As for the New World Order, so I don't want to ridicule people. I don't want to dismiss it as, because then that feeds the appeal of because he just said stupid. That's not a real argument, and it isn't, and I agree. Which this is why I wanted to add this postscript. In terms of the New World Order, yeah, of course they did it. Duh. We don't need to raise it to know that.
When all's said and done, it just goes back down to, well, yeah, of course the New World Order did. All right, that was a look back, and hopefully, one thing that I guess I wanted to say is, as you're listening to this, and you're reminiscing about all the lives that were lost on 9/11. There's a lot of bullshit that's out there. There's a lot of stories that's out there. There's a lot of conspiracies that are out there. But in reality, it's best just to remember that, nearly 3,000 people perished. An additional 10,000 were injured in the most horrific attack on U.S. soil. And it's a stark reminder that was the day that innocence was lost globally. I mean, it literally did change the world as far as how the world reacts to mass surveillance, how the world reacts to plane flights. It's just changed everything. And the world is different now because of it.
The world is different. However, I would warn against, obviously, 9/11 is, as I've already said, it was a tragedy. As you've said, it has changed things. I would warn against glorifying or idealizing or, in fact, using events to fuel ideologies. Ultimately, the pain passes, the lessons are learned or not learned, and the mistakes will be repeated as they do throughout history. I recall that day. I came back from school and I turned on television as I normally do to watch my cartoons. It was Simpsons or something. And I switch on the channel, and before it was like an early afternoon show where they cook stews and interview celebrities sort of thing. So I switched to that and was waiting for it to finish so I could, watch the cartoon. In the meantime, I was going to make myself a cup of tea or something. I turned the channel, stood up to go for the tea, and all of a sudden everyone's really somber. There's a black bar underneath saying, tragic events in New York. I switched to the channel and saw it there just as it was minutes after the first building hit. The first plane hit the first building. Mm-hmm. The second one wasn't hit yet. I'm just sitting there, as I would imagine many, because I've been to New York before. It's one of my favorite pictures from when we lived in the States was me on top of the World Trade Center, and we've had it. That was in our family. That's one of the pictures we always put on the fridge, and etc. Sort of was us and me, sort of with a massive 6-year-old grin on my face and big American style sunglasses, standing on top of the World Trade Center, and I felt like a king of the world. Little boy from Eastern Europe goes to America, goes to fucking New York, stands on top of the World Trade Center. I never thought that would happen in my life, let alone at such an early age. So the place had, as to many people, had a special significance, and that's why they targeted it. I'm sitting looking at it, and I'm not easily ruffled by things, but I was very ruffled that day. And my sister came home, and I screamed at her, "Come here immediately! The World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, have been hit by a plane." They're like, "Fuck off." Comes there, sits down, and goes immediately pale. Second plane hits, and she just bursts into tears. I pick up the phone, call my mother, who was having treatment in a little spa town outside where we lived, because she has severe health problems, so she was on a sort of 3-day stay just to recover a little bit. So I called her and I said, "Terrorist attack on the Twin Towers, go watch the news." And as we were talking, first one came down, sort of thing. And she couldn't believe it. Obviously we talk. And then she goes into the room of this sort of the reception room, or the sort of relaxing area of they had sofas, board games, and TVs, etc. And she was very she was in her 40s then, I guess. But this sort of resort, as you'd imagine, was mostly catering to seniors, because they would be the ones who have the significant health problems that my mother unfortunately had at an early age. So she goes there, and it's a room full of seniors, and the TV is on some telenovela. And they're all watching the telenovela. They didn't know this had happened. So my mother walks up to the TV, switches it to the news channel, roars of protest. And the seniors all shout at her, "Put it back," and she's like, "But terrorist attack on the Twin Towers have just happened. Collapsing. Towers are burning. People are dying." And the seniors responded with, "But Imelda has just cheated on Rodrigo. Buildings and men fight every day. Switch back on the telenovela." And they switched back. To them, to these seniors, people who've been alive for decades, people who've lived through World War II, just another event, an episode in a series of douchebaggery they've encountered all their lives, living through the 30s regimes, living through World War II, living through what came afterwards. To them, It's happened. I've seen this happening all the fucking time in my life. So just give me my moment to watch fucking Imelda cheat on Rodrigo. Let's not forget that perspective. Let's learn from that perspective, and perhaps somehow through that world weariness, through that wisdom, make sure that these things don't happen. I guess because frankly, we've all just got too much of our own shit to be crashing things into and killing other people anyway.
Yeah, a lot less killing of other people, which is a great high five.
No, pause.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. I mean, we're already at hour 45,
Yeah,
but since we have a break, shall we just do it a 2-part episode?
That's what I was going to actually tell you as well.
Okay.
We can just do. Stay tuned for next week's special, where we'll get into this, that, and everything else. In 3, 2, 1. And you've come to the end of part 1 of, yes, this is a 2-parter, and the reasoning why is because there's still so much to talk about, and, well, we didn't want to waste 4 hours of your day at once, so we'll split this up, and you can hear part 2 next week. Be sure to go over to jsbspod.com. Check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/JSBSpod. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at JSBSpod. Head over to Patreon, patreon.com/JSBSpod.
I can hear little murmurs of protest there in the background saying, you just learned how to be more succinct and we wanted an episode next week with, mental patients and a different country, etc. Yeah, fine. We're being kind to you here, people, so don't be ungrateful shits. Truth is, the reason why we're making this a 2-parter, fine, we have a lot of material to talk about, unusually, and B, the next 3 weekends, I am going to be crawling drunk across the English countryside, so there will be no episodes. So, we're trying to do you a favour here so that you don't get withdrawal symptoms, God forbid, or realise that there's actually other ways you can spend your time. So, we're drip feeding you.
Yes.
So, nurses Nick and Radovan, are administering your drip of bullshit.
Alright, so this is the end of episode 1. We will get to part 2 moving on the following week. As always, that's roughly an hour and 30 odd minutes of your life you're never gonna get